I woke up that morning alone. The kind of alone that felt different from being single or isolated. This was the kind of solitude you feel when you've lived in the same place for nearly 4 decades. March 15th, my 60th birthday. The house where I had raised Marcus, built my life, and watched my world shift with every passing year, was still and quiet. The walls, thick with history, stood there unchanged. The photos on the walls, some faded, others almost pristine, told a story I knew by heart. There was Marcus at his high school graduation, beaming proudly in a cap and gown. The next photo, him at Stanford, shaking hands with the president of the university, ready to take on the world. A few years later, there he was again at his wedding, standing next to Jessica, a woman who had become his partner in a way that I never truly understood. And finally, the most recent one, Marcus and Jessica with their twin boys, looking so happy, so complete. I stared at those photos for a long time, and for a moment, I wondered if I had ever been a part of that picture, really, truly a part of it, or had I just been the backdrop, the man who made sure everything was set up, provided everything he needed, only to find himself left in the corner, unseen. I sighed, forcing myself to look away from the walls. Today was my day, but it felt as if it was slipping through my fingers before it even began. It's funny, isn't it, how we think that turning 60 is somehow a milestone we've been waiting for. And yet, when it actually comes, it feels more like an afterthought. I shuffled downstairs, the creaking of the old wood floors beneath my slippers somehow comforting. The kitchen was just as I remembered it, well worn and familiar. The kettle was still where it had always been, on the left side of the counter. I filled it with water and set it on the stove, the flicker of the flame beneath it casting a soft glow. Then, I did what I did every morning. I made coffee. Nothing fancy, just the regular stuff. The kind that fills the room with the rich, bitter aroma, the kind of warmth that has been part of my mornings for as long as I could remember. I grabbed my favorite mug, cracked at the lip, but still my go-to, and poured the dark liquid in. I liked it strong, the kind of coffee that could keep me going through the long days of work. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the phone. I knew exactly what was supposed to happen next. Marcus would call. He always did, like clockwork. Ever since he was born, he had been the first one to wish me happy birthday. It didn't matter if he was in a meeting, traveling for work, or busy with the twins. At 7 a.m., without fail, I'd hear his voice on the other end of the line. The deep, slightly rushed voice that had become so familiar over the years. "Happy birthday, Dad." He'd say the words, always warm and filled with affection. It was a ritual, a tradition. The first thing I'd hear on my birthday, and for years, it had felt like the glue that held everything together, like the one thing I could always rely on. But that morning, as the minutes ticked by, the phone remained silent. It wasn't a big deal at first. Life had a way of getting complicated. I knew that much. Marcus had a family now, responsibilities, work. The twins had their soccer games. They were probably out the door and his attention was elsewhere. I understood that, of course, I did. But as the hours dragged on, I started to feel it. That familiar tightness in my chest. The kind of anxiety you get when you know something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. By 10 a.m., I told myself he was just busy. He probably had a meeting or something important came up. After all, Marcus was always juggling 100 things at once. I pushed the feeling down, told myself not to be silly. By noon, I felt it again. That old, familiar knot. And this time it didn't just hurt, it itched. It started to gnaw at me. It had been 3 days since my birthday, and the silence felt deafening. I pushed the thoughts away, but they kept coming back, poking and prodding until I couldn't ignore them anymore. This wasn't just about a missed phone call. No, it was something deeper than that. Something I had been avoiding for a long time. The truth was, I had been here before. I'd been here 3 years ago when Marcus asked me to co-sign on his house. At the time, he was confident everything would work out. "You're the best dad," he had said, as if that was enough to cover everything. And I had signed the papers, as I always did when it came to Marcus. He was my son, my only son. I'd do anything for him. But when his startup failed, and the bills piled up, guess who covered them? Me. I didn't ask for anything in return. It was just part of being a father. You don't keep score. You do it because it's your job, your responsibility, and you don't expect anything back. But when I covered 6 months of his mortgage payments and he never so much as said thank you, that old familiar sting came back. The one I felt when I covered $40,000 for that investment with Jessica's dad, and still, I hadn't seen a penny of it returned. That was 2 years ago. And now, here I was, feeling the weight of it all once again. I didn't want to be that father, the one who kept track of every favor, every sacrifice. That was never my intention. But today, something felt different. Something was changing. I could feel it in my bones. By 6 p.m. I knew he'd forgotten. And as I sat there in my worn recliner staring at the empty coffee mug in my hands, I realized I was no longer angry. I wasn't upset. I was just ... tired. Tired of always being the one to give, the one to bail him out, the one who sacrificed everything, and for what? I had worked every single day for Marcus. I'd done it all, working the night shifts, the long hours, the side jobs, just to make sure he had everything. The best schools, the sports equipment, the car when he turned 16, the college education he couldn't have gotten without me. I had sacrificed every ounce of myself to make sure he didn't miss out on anything. But somewhere along the line, I had lost myself. Somewhere along the way, Marcus had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. I had been here before, but today, for the first time, I wasn't going to pretend that everything was fine. I wasn't going to ignore the fact that he hadn't called, that he hadn't even remembered. I had spent my entire life working for him, sacrificing everything so that he could have it all. And for the first time in 60 years, I felt as though I was invisible. The house was quieter than usual. After Sarah passed, the silence here had never quite been the same. There was always a stillness in the air, a feeling that no amount of cleaning or rearranging could ever quite lift. It wasn't just the house that had changed, it was me too. Everything felt different now, like the world had moved on, but I was stuck in place. I had spent so many years thinking about Marcus, planning for his future, working myself into the ground for him. When Sarah died, I was left with nothing but a 12-year-old boy and a promise I made to myself. I would give him everything I didn't have, no matter what it took. I used to think that when you became a parent, you just knew what to do, but for me, it wasn't that simple. When Sarah got sick, I dropped everything. The dreams I'd had for myself went into the background. She was gone in 8 months, but Marcus was still here, and I was sealed here, about to let him feel the weight of the world on his shoulders at such a young age. So I worked, and I worked, and I worked. I pulled long shifts at the distribution center, night after night. And when I wasn't there, I was picking up extra hours doing security at the local mall, making sure I could pay the bills. On the weekends, I took up handyman work, painting houses, fixing fences, anything that would keep us afloat. I was never home, and when I was too tired to even say goodnight. But I did it because I loved him. I wanted him to have a future where he didn't have to worry about money, where he could follow his dreams and not be limited by the things I'd sacrificed everything for him, and he never even asked for it. I still remember the day Marcus came to me with that letter from Stanford. I had just finished my shift, and there it was, sitting on the table, unopened. When I saw it, I thought for sure it was some sort of rejection letter. I almost didn't open it, but Marcus had already started tearing the envelope open. "Dad, it's from Stanford," he said, his voice full of excitement. I thought I was going to cry. He'd gotten in. I'd worked so hard to give him a shot at a better life, and here it was, all coming to fruition. This was it. This was his moment. And for a second I saw everything I had worked for. All the late nights, all the overtime, all the skipped meals, it was all worth it. Marcus was going to have a future. He was going to be somebody, but that was also the moment I realized something I didn't want to admit at the time. I had no idea how I was going to afford it. Stanford cost $50,000 a year. I barely had enough to get by as it was, but I did it. I took out loans, emptied my savings, and worked even harder to make sure Marcus didn't have to worry about anything. It didn't matter that I was in debt. It didn't matter that I was 51 years old, working 3 jobs, and staring down a mountain of bills. Marcus needed to go to Stanford. He deserved it. I'd figure it out. I figured I'd worry about myself later, after Marcus was settled, after he had the life I never had, the one I couldn't give him, the one I always wished I had. I had hoped, foolishly, that once he graduated, he'd take care of me somehow, that he'd recognize the sacrifices I'd made, that he'd see the lengths I went to give him everything. But that wasn't how it worked out. Marcus graduated, but I was still buried under debt. The loans I took out for his tuition were still hanging over me like a dark cloud, and yet there I was, smiling, clapping, feeling so proud of him. But inside, I was dying, because I realized that despite everything I'd done for him, he didn't seem to see it. Or maybe, deep down, he just expected it. When Marcus graduated, I was 51 years old with a mountain of debt and no clear way to pay it off. But that's what fathers do, right? They sacrifice for their children, even if it means sacrificing themselves. Even if it means giving up their dreams, their financial security, their peace of mind. Marcus started working and he met Jessica. She was sweet, kind, and from a family with money. It was a relief to see him with someone who seemed to care about him, who seemed to understand him in a way I never quite did. But as I watched them, I started to realize something else. Marcus didn't need me as much as he used to. He didn't need me to make things happen for him anymore. He had Jessica. He had his career, and I had become a distant memory, a safety net, always there when he needed me, but never truly present in his life. A few years passed, and I kept working. I kept paying the bills, fixing things around the house, trying to stay on top of everything. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of myself. I was still the man who provided, who worked, who did everything for Marcus. But the man I used to be, the man who had dreams and hopes for himself, was gone. I remember the day Marcus asked me for $40,000. He needed it for an investment opportunity, one of Jessica's father's projects. I didn't think twice. I was already stretched thin financially, but I gave it to him. After all, he promised to pay me back in a year. He had always been good about paying me back, hadn't he? The thing is, he never did. Not a word. No check, no phone call, nothing. That same feeling came back, the one I'd pushed down so many times before. The feeling that I wasn't as important as I had once been. That I wasn't the hero in his life anymore. It was like I had become the background noise, always there, always reliable, but never the main event. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. But it was a huge deal. And somewhere deep down I realized that I had been keeping score. I had been holding on to those small slights, the little moments where I was overlooked, ignored, or taken for granted. The phone sat on the kitchen table, silent. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. By 6 p.m. I was sure Marcus had forgotten my own son, the one I had spent my life working for, the one I had sacrificed everything for, had forgotten my birthday. The recliner I sat in was the same one I'd bought secondhand years ago, a simple chair that had been my companion through long, lonely nights after Sarah died. It was a chair where I sat and watched Marcus grow up, where I held his hand when things were tough, where I gave him advice I hoped he'd remember one day. And now, here I was, in that same chair, feeling more alone than ever before. I thought back to all the years I had spent working, and working some more. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for Marcus, the nights I spent away from home, the weekends I worked instead of spending time with him. It was all for him, and now, it felt like none of it mattered. I was tired, so tired, tired of giving. Tired of being the one to always sacrifice, tired of being the father who was always expected to do it all, to give it all, without question. And then it hit me. Marcus wasn't the only one who had changed. I had changed, too. I wasn't the man who could keep sacrificing for him anymore. I wasn't the man who could keep giving without receiving anything in return. It was time for a change. It was time for me to start living for myself. The next few days felt like a blur. The house was as quiet as ever. The ticking of the clock seemed louder, more pronounced, as if it were mocking me. The silence was deafening. I kept thinking about the call that never came, about Marcus's absence in my life. It wasn't just about the missed birthday, it was the pattern that had started to form, a pattern of neglect, of him being there only when he needed something, and not when it was time to show up for me. Every time I thought about it, I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite place, betrayal maybe, or disappointment, maybe both. I had been the one to always be there, the one to drop everything for him, but when I needed him, when I needed just one thing, a call on my birthday, he couldn't even manage that. That was when I realized it. I had been living for Marcus. Everything I did, every decision I made, every sacrifice I made was for him. And where had it gotten me? He hadn't even called me on my birthday. He hadn't even thought enough to remember. And somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't keep going down this path. I knew it was time to confront him. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to accomplish with the call. I guess I just wanted to hear something that would make me feel better, make me feel like the father. I once was the father who had been his hero, the father who had worked so hard to make sure Marcus had every opportunity he could possibly need. But I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. I knew there was no easy answer to what had been happening between us. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before I answered. "Hey, Dad," Marcus said, his voice distracted. It was always distracted, like he was already thinking about the next thing he had to do. "Hey, Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him shuffling papers or clicking on his computer. "About what?" "About everything," I said, trying to gather my thoughts. "About the house, about the loans, about the things you've asked me for, and the things you've never acknowledged, and about my birthday, you missed it, and I don't know how to feel about that anymore." I could hear Marcus sigh. "Dad, come on, I didn't mean to forget. I've just been overwhelmed with work, with the twins, with everything. It's been crazy. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the truth was, I was tired of excuses, tired of waiting for him to realize the things I had been doing for him, the sacrifices I had made without ever asking for anything in return. It's not just about the birthday, Marcus, I said, my voice tightening. It's about everything. The money I lent you for that investment. The mortgage I covered for 6 months when your startup fell apart. The $40,000 for Jessica's father's business. I'm still waiting for you to pay me back. I'm still waiting for some recognition, for some appreciation for everything I've done for you. There was a long silence, too long, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. I know, Dad, I know. I've just been busy, and I'm sorry. You're sorry, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. You've said that before, Marcus. You've said sorry so many times. But you never do anything about it. You never change. You never pay me back. You never follow through. You just keep asking, keep taking, and I just keep giving. I'm not asking for anything, Dad, Marcus said, his voice rising. I'm not asking you for more money or anything like that. I just know you don't get it. I interrupted. I've given everything I have, Marcus. Everything, and it's never been enough. You've always needed more. I've always needed more, and you've always assumed I would be, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep sacrificing. I can't keep giving and never get anything in return. Marcus was silent for a long time. I could feel him processing what I had said, but there was no response, no apology, no acknowledgement. And in that moment, I realized that he wasn't going to change, not unless something drastic happened, not unless he hit rock bottom, and I wasn't about to wait for that. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, the weight of everything sinking in. My chest felt tight, like I was carrying a burden that was too heavy to bear. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I had been too much of a provider and not enough of a father. Maybe I had set the bar too high, expecting Marcus to step up without realizing how much of a safety net I had been. But it was too late for regret. It was too late for second guessing. The next few days felt like a blur. The weight of the conversation with Marcus hung over me like a cloud. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were never going to change, that Marcus was never going to understand what I had done for him, that he was never going to recognize the sacrifices I had made, and that hurt. It hurt more than I could put into words. I spent the next few days cleaning out the garage, going through old boxes of memories. It was something I always did when I needed to clear my head. But as I went through the boxes, I found something that took me by surprise. A letter I had written to Marcus on his high school graduation day. The letter was simple, nothing fancy, just a few words from a father who was proud of his son. But as I read it, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I remembered how proud I had been that day. I remembered how much I had sacrificed to get him to that point, to give him the opportunities he had. And now, here I was, staring at this letter, wondering if he even remembered the man who had helped him get there. I put the letter down, my hands shaking. For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. The days after the call with Marcus felt strangely empty. The house, once filled with memories of a life well lived, now seemed like a ghost of itself. Each room held the echoes of conversations long past, laughter from years ago, the kind of joy that had now faded into the past. And me, I was stuck in the middle of it, lost in a place that no longer felt like home. I had spent so many years working for this house. The hours I put in, the overtime, the side jobs, the constant pressure of making sure everything was just right for Marcus. This house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had given. But now, it felt like the house had become more of a burden than a sanctuary. It wasn't the house itself. It was everything surrounding it, the unanswered phone calls, the overlooked sacrifices, the years of effort and devotion that had gone unappreciated. As I sat in the recliner that had become my refuge over the years, I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. The house, the memories, the loneliness, everything seemed to have accumulated over the years, and now I was stuck holding it all, and Marcus, he hadn't even noticed. It wasn't just the missed birthday, it was the realization that I had spent my whole life making sure he had everything he needed, and in return, he had given me nothing but empty promises. And then, there was the conversation about the house. It had been eating at me since the phone call. Marcus hadn't come out and said it directly, but he had made it clear that he thought it was time for me to give up the house. The house that I had worked so hard for, the house that held my memories, my life. It was no longer something I was meant to hold on to. Dad, you really need to think about the future, he had said. The house is too much for you to handle now, and it's just going to get harder. His voice had been casual, like it was just another thing on his to-do list. He hadn't even considered how I might feel about it. That conversation had stuck with me, knowing at the edges of my mind. It wasn't just about the house. It was about the assumption that I was getting old and weak, that I needed to be moved into a nice senior living community nearby, as if that was the only option left for me. He didn't ask how I felt about it. He didn't even try to understand why this house meant so much to me. To him, it was just another inconvenience, a hurdle to cross, something to be dealt with. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to be put out to pasture just yet. I wasn't ready to give up on the life I had built. Not yet. The next morning I drove to the office, my mind still spinning from everything. I couldn't get the conversation with Marcus out of my head. As much as I tried to rationalize it, I knew deep down that this wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the property or the bills or the repairs. It was about respect. It was about how little Marcus seemed to care about the things I had done for him, the sacrifices I had made to give him a better life. At the office, I sat at my desk, the weight of everything pressing down on me. It was hard to focus, harder to push the thoughts out of my head. Marcus's words kept echoing in my mind. The house was too much for me to handle. The house wasn't just a physical structure. It was everything I had worked for, and now it seemed like the one thing that mattered most to me was being dismissed. I spent the day distracted, and by the time I left work, I knew what I had to do. It was time to make some changes. It was time to stop being the invisible father, the one who was always there to bail him out but never got anything in return. It was time to take control of my own life. That evening, I sat down with the papers I had been avoiding for weeks: the deed to the house, the life insurance policy, my savings. As I went through them, I realized just how much I had kept from Marcus. He didn't know about the life insurance policy Sarah had left behind, the $250,000 that had grown into nearly $600,000 over the years. I had never touched it. I'd kept working, paying for everything with my own money. I didn't want Marcus to think of me as a bank. I wanted him to find his own way, to understand the value of hard work. But somewhere along the way, I realized that I had been doing it all for him. I had been so focused on giving him everything he needed that I had lost track of my own needs, my own desires. And now, I was at a crossroads. Did I keep giving? Did I keep sacrificing? Or did I take a step back and live for myself for the first time in decades? I looked at the duplex I had bought 5 years ago as a rental property. That night, I called my lawyer, Richard Moss. He'd been my lawyer for years. He had handled Sarah's estate and helped me set up my will. I needed to make some changes. "Robert, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" Richard said when he picked up the phone. "I need to make some changes to my will," I said, my voice steady but determined. "I want to remove Marcus as my primary beneficiary." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Excuse me, you want to do what?" "I want to remove Marcus," I repeated. "He's not the person I thought he was. He's not the person I raised. And it's time for me to stop enabling him." Richard didn't speak for a moment. "This is a big decision, Robert. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said, my heart pounding. "I've spent 60 years living for Marcus. It's time I start living for myself." The following morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at a precipice, looking down at something that felt irreversible. It was as if the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was no longer sure which way I was supposed to go. But for the first time in years, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Marcus control my life anymore. I had been living for him for so long, sacrificing everything I had, that I had forgotten what it was like to live for myself. I spent the next few days in a haze, caught between the weight of the decision I had made and the relief that followed. There was a strange peace in knowing that I was no longer bound by the expectations of a son who had taken me for granted. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I had to let go of the idea that Marcus would ever truly appreciate everything I had done for him. And with that realization, I felt a shift inside of me, a sense of freedom. It was like I had finally taken back control of my life. I met with Richard a few days later to make the changes official. His office smelled like old wood, the kind of scent you associate with a place that has seen decades of history. The polished oak paneling, the leather chairs, the stacks of paperwork, it all felt so permanent. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I was stepping into something permanent too. A future without Marcus as my primary beneficiary. A future where I would live for myself. Richard set the papers in front of me. "This is what you want. Robert, are you sure?" I glanced at the papers, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Yes, I'm sure." I signed the documents, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. The decision was made. I was finally taking the reins of my own life. A week later, I made another decision. It was time to sell the house. The place that had been the center of my life for so many years was no longer where I wanted to be. It wasn't just the house itself, but what it represented. The memories of raising Marcus here, of the sacrifices I had made, of the life I had built around him, it was all too much. I needed a fresh start. And I was determined to find it. I called a real estate agent, a nonsense woman named Patricia, who had a reputation for getting things done quickly. I explained my situation, and she agreed to take a look at the property. After a quick walkthrough, she made a list of minor repairs, things like fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom and repainting the front door. She had a plan in place to list the house within a week, and I felt a sense of finality settle over me. This was happening. "Expect offers within 2 weeks, Patricia said confidently. "It's a great location, and the house is well maintained. It'll sell fast," and she was right. Within 10 days, I had 4 offers on the table. I chose the best one for $120,000 in cash, with a 30-day closing. The deal was done, but even as the house was being sold, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was going to fight me on this. I didn't want to think about it, but I knew deep down that he wouldn't just accept my decision. He never had before. The thought of Marcus coming to me angry and demanding answers made my stomach tighten. But I also knew I couldn't let him dictate my life anymore. As the days passed, I packed up the house. Every box I packed felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Each piece of furniture, each memento, each photograph, it was all a part of my past. A past that was now closing its door. When I got to Marcus's old bedroom, I hesitated. It was like opening a time capsule. The posters on the walls, the trophies on the shelf, the childhood drawings taped to the mirror, they were all still there, frozen in time. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking it all in. I remembered when Marcus was little, when he'd run around the house, always full of energy, always looking for the next adventure. And I remembered how much I loved being his dad, how proud I was of the man he had become. But that was before he got too busy, before he stopped needing me the way he once had. A few days later, I received a call that confirmed my suspicions. It was Marcus. "Dad, what's going on? I just heard from Jessica's mom that their SA sold sign in front of the house. What are you doing?" His voice was frantic, the tone one of disbelief. I took a deep breath before responding. "I sold the house, Marcus. It's done." "What do you mean, it's done?" His voice rose. "Dad, that's our house, my childhood home. You can't just sell it without talking to me first." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "It's my house, Marcus, and I've made my decision." He was silent for a moment, processing what I had just said. "You sold our house without even telling me, without even giving me a chance to talk to you about it." "I didn't need your permission, Marcus. I didn't need anyone's permission. It's my life, and I'm finally living it for me, not for you, not for anyone else, just for me." There was another long silence on the other end of the phone. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was quieter, more defeated. "So, what now, Dad? Where are you going to live?" "I bought a condo in Phoenix," I said. "I'm starting over. It's time for a change." "Phoenix?" Marcus's voice cracked. "You're really doing this?" "I am, and I'm not looking back." I ended the call and sat there for a long time, looking out the window at the house that was no longer mine. It was the end of an era. A chapter had closed. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of peace. The closing on the house took place a few weeks later. The check for $420,000 was handed over, and I deposited it into my account. I had done it. I had sold the house, taken control of my life, and finally made the decision to stop living for Marcus. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and yet there was still a part of me that wondered what the future held. I had no idea what would happen between Marcus and me. I didn't know if we would ever reconcile, if he would ever understand why I had made the choices I did. But I did know one thing. I was no longer invisible. I had taken back my life. I had taken back my future. The first few days after the sale felt surreal. It was like waking up from a long, exhausting dream, one where I had been trapped in a never-ending cycle of giving and waiting for something in return. The house was gone, but the memories still lingered, like shadows that followed me through every room. But I was free now. And even though there was a deep ache in my chest, a sadness I couldn't quite name, I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I'd spent so much of my life working toward one goal, making sure Marcus had everything he needed, and I had forgotten to live for myself. But now, for the first time in decades, I was living for me. I had made the decision to move to Phoenix. The condo I bought was small, cozy, and perfect for what I needed. It was a fresh start, a new chapter, and for the first time, I was excited about it. The condo was modest: 2 bedrooms, a small balcony with a view of the mountains, and a pool in the complex. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was mine. It felt like a place I could breathe again. The weight of the years spent in that old house, the years of sacrifice and disappointment, began to lift. The air in Phoenix was dry, and the sun seemed to shine brighter here than it ever did back home. It felt like the universe was telling me I had made the right choice. I spent the first few days unpacking, organizing, and settling in. It felt strange at first, walking around in a place that was mine and mine alone. I didn't have to worry about Marcus's expectations or Jessica's assumptions. I didn't have to worry about anything except my own happiness. I had always wanted a place like this, a quiet, simple life where I could finally focus on myself. I joined a hiking group and found a local volunteer opportunity at a literacy center. I met a woman named Marka, who was 70 but had more energy than I could ever hope for. We went on walks together, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in a long time, I was beginning to feel like I belonged somewhere that wasn't defined by my relationship with Marcus. But even as I settled in, Marcus was still there. His calls kept coming, day after day, his voice getting more desperate with each one. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't want to. I couldn't deal with him right now. I needed space to breathe, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what kind of relationship we could have anymore. The foundation had cracked, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. 3 weeks after I moved to Phoenix, I received an email from Marcus. It was the first time he had reached out in this way, and the message was different from the usual angry texts or voicemail rants. This time, there was an apology. The email was long, longer than any message he had ever sent me before. He admitted he hadn't been a good son. He acknowledged that he had taken me for granted, that he had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. He talked about his struggles with work with Jessica's family, and how he had gotten so caught up in trying to impress them that he had forgotten about me. He also told me something I wasn't expecting. He had been in therapy. Apparently, Jessica had suggested it after I moved away. She was worried about him. He said he had talked to Uncle David, who had filled him in on some things he didn't know. He didn't know about the years I had worked 3 jobs to pay for his education, the loans I had taken out to send him to Stanford, or the sacrifices I had made to give him the life he had. He didn't know about the life insurance money Sarah had left behind, or the duplex I had bought as a rental property. He had no idea I was financially secure. And then he said something that hit me harder than I expected. He told me he had been wrong. He told me he was sorry. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was hearing him. Not just hearing his words, but hearing the truth behind them. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Dad," he wrote. "I don't deserve it. But I want to try to be better. I want to show you that I can be the son you raised. I know I've screwed up, but I'm asking for another chance." The email ended with an offer to pay me back everything he owed, plus interest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I sat there for a long time after reading the email. Part of me wanted to call him, to tell him how much I appreciated his apology, to tell him I was proud of him for making the effort to change. But another part of me, maybe the stronger part, wanted to let him sit with it, let him figure it out for himself. In the end, I didn't call him. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I took the $50,000 check he had sent me and deposited it into a college fund for the twins, every penny of it. It was a gesture, I suppose, but it was my way of showing him that I wasn't doing this for the money. I was doing this for my own peace of mind. I didn't want to keep score anymore. I just wanted to let go. The next few days were quiet. I didn't hear from Marcus. I didn't know if he was angry, hurt, or just processing everything. But I wasn't going to chase him anymore. The door wasn't closed, but it wasn't wide open either. I had learned that sometimes you have to step back, let people figure things out for themselves. I called my friend Tom, the one I used to play racquetball with. He was still in town, still trying to stay active in his 50s, and he suggested we meet up for a game. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a reason to smile. I had been so consumed with the past that I had forgotten about the present. There were still people who cared about me. I still had a life to live. 2 weeks after Marcus sent the email, I finally decided to call him. I wasn't sure what to say, but I knew I couldn't leave things unresolved forever. I dialed his number, my heart pounding in my chest. When he picked up, his voice sounded tired, but there was something else in it too, something softer, something that made me believe he was finally listening. "Hey Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got your email." There was a long pause. "Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I've been thinking about everything, about what I did, about what I didn't do. I don't know how to make it right, but I want to try." "I know you do," I said, "but you have to understand something, Marcus. I've given everything I had, and I'm not going to keep doing that. You need to understand that respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn. And it's not just about money or favors. It's about showing up. It's about being there for me when I need you. Not just when you need something from me. I get it, Dad, I do, he said, his voice quiet. And I want to be there for you. I want to be the son you raised, not the one I've been. The next few weeks were quieter than I expected. I kept myself busy settling into my new life in Phoenix. The condo was small but cozy, and it had a certain charm that I hadn't anticipated. The mountain views from the balcony were calming, and I spent my mornings drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over the desert. There was a sense of freedom here I hadn't known before, a sense of peace that came from knowing I didn't have to keep giving, didn't have to keep sacrificing without receiving anything in return. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for myself. But even as I tried to move forward, Marcus was always there, in the background of my thoughts. His words from the email echoed in my mind, how he was sorry, how he wanted to try to be better, how he was taking responsibility for his actions. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he had finally grown up, that he had learned the lessons I had spent so many years trying to teach him. But part of me was still skeptical. How many times had I heard promises from him, only to be let down again? I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if he would change or if this was just another phase. But I knew one thing for certain. Couldn't he be the one to make it happen? He had to want it for himself. He had to show me, through his actions, that he was ready to be the son I had always hoped he would be. A month passed, and then, one day, Marcus called. I almost didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to keep the walls up, to keep the distance between us, but something inside of me told me it was time to face him, to hear him out. "Hey, Dad," he said. When I picked up, his voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "Hey, Marcus," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "How's everything going?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he was thinking about what to say. "It's going okay," he said, finally. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About everything. About us." I stayed silent, letting him speak. "I've been talking to Jessica a lot. About what's been going on. About how I've treated you. I didn't realize it before, but I've been selfish. I've been so focused on myself and what I wanted, that I completely ignored what you needed. And that's not okay, Dad. It's not right." I felt a small shift in my chest as I listened to him. For the first time in a long time, I believed he meant it. I believed he was finally seeing things from my perspective. "I don't know how to make up for everything I've done," he continued, "but I want to try. I know it's going to take time. And I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. But I want to be there for you. I want to be the son you raised, and I want to prove to you that I can be better." I took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. It was hard to let go of the past, to forgive him for all the times he had let me down. But hearing him speak so honestly, so openly, made something inside me shift. Maybe it wasn't too late for us. Maybe this was the beginning of something better. "I appreciate you saying that, Marcus," I said after a moment. "And I want you to know that I'm not expecting you to fix everything overnight. But I need you to understand something. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not here just to bail you out when things go wrong. You need to take responsibility for your own life or your own choices." "I know, Dad, I know," he said. "And I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to stop depending on you for everything. He hesitated, like he wasn't sure how to put his feelings into words. "I just want to make things right." We talked for a while longer, catching up on life and the things that had been happening. It wasn't the most profound conversation, but it was a step, a real one. For the first time I felt like Marcus was finally starting to understand, and maybe, just maybe, we were on the path to rebuilding what had been broken. I spent the next few weeks focusing on my own life, but I couldn't help but think about Marcus. He was trying. I could see it, feel it, in the way he spoke, in the things he said. It wasn't easy to trust him again, but I wasn't ready to close the door on him. I had spent too many years giving everything I had to him to just walk away. This wasn't about being perfect. This was about learning, growing, and finding a new way to be family. We started talking more regularly, checking in with each other once a week. It wasn't much, but it was something. He told me about his work struggles, about how he was trying to balance his career with being a good father. He talked about Jessica and how they were trying to rebuild their relationship. I could tell he was making an effort, and that was all I really needed to see. And then one day out of the blue, Marcus asked me if I wanted to come visit him and the twins in Lake Tahoe. It had been months since I'd seen them, and I didn't know if I was ready to see how things had changed, how my relationship with Marcus had shifted, but something told me it was time. The drive to Lake Tahoe felt longer than it should have. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would it be awkward? Would I feel like an outsider in my own son's life, or would it be different this time? Would things feel ... normal? I didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at me the entire way. When I finally arrived, I was greeted by Marcus and the twins, who were running around the yard chasing each other and laughing. It was a strange, bittersweet feeling to see them so happy, so full of life. But as soon as Marcus saw me, he waved and jogged over, a genuine smile on his face. "Hey, Dad," he said, clapping me on the back. "Good to see you." "Good to see you too, Marcus," I said, my voice a little shaky. The twins ran up to me next, shouting "Grandpa," and giving me big hugs. It felt ... nice. It felt like something was shifting inside me, like maybe we were starting to find our way back to each other. Over the next few days, we spent time together hiking, playing with the kids, talking about everything and nothing. It was the most I'd talked to Marcus in years, and for the first time in a long time I felt like we were truly connecting. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a fairy tale reunion, but it was progress. We were learning how to be a family again, one step at a time. On the last day of my visit, before I left for Phoenix, Marcus gave me a small box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with the words "Always your son" engraved on it. I stared at it for a moment, not sure what to say. "I know I've messed up, Dad," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'm always here. I want to be the son you raised." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the man he was trying to become. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more to me than you'll ever know." The drive back to Phoenix was long, but it gave me plenty of time to think. I reflected on the visit to Lake Tahoe and the time I had spent with Marcus and the twins. It wasn't perfect. We hadn't had some grand tear-filled reunion where everything was magically fixed, but something had changed, something subtle, something that I could feel deep in my bones. We were on the right path. I couldn't help but marvel at how far things had come, even though it had been a slow burn. I'd spent so many years feeling like I was invisible in Marcus's life, like I was nothing more than a resource for him to pull from when it was convenient. But now, I was starting to see glimpses of the son I had raised, the son who had once looked up to me, the son who had admired me as his hero. That son was still in there, somewhere. Maybe he had been lost for a while, caught up in his own ambitions and priorities. But he was waking up again, and maybe, just maybe, I could be a part of that awakening. The week following my trip, Marcus called. The frequency of his calls had increased since my move to Phoenix, and it was clear that he was making an effort. He wasn't just checking in anymore, he was really trying to connect, to show that he cared. "Hey, Dad," he said on one of our calls. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said when I was in Tahoe about how respect isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn." I smiled, glad to hear him say that. It was the kind of realization that had taken me years to understand, and hearing him grasp it felt like a small victory. "I've been trying to think of ways I can show you that I'm making an effort," Marcus continued. "And I was thinking, what if I flew down to Phoenix for a weekend, just the two of us? We can do something that we used to do when I was younger, go for a hike, grab a beer, just talk." The idea caught me off guard. It had been a long time since Marcus had made the effort to spend time with me like this. I had spent so many years running after him, waiting for him to show up, that I had forgotten how good it felt to have him take the initiative. It felt like a turning point. "I'd like that," I said, my voice steady, but with an underlying sense of emotion that I didn't want to acknowledge. "I'd really like that." A few weeks later, Marcus flew in, and it felt like old times, in the best way possible. We spent the weekend hiking through the desert trails near my condo, the dry air filling our lungs as we talked about everything and nothing. We laughed, reminisced about old memories, and shared stories that we hadn't told each other in years. It felt effortless, like we were picking up where we had left off. At one point, we stopped at the top of a ridge, overlooking the valley below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape, and for a moment, everything felt right. I looked over at Marcus, his face lit by the golden light, and realized something. He was trying. He was really trying. "Dad," he said, his voice softer now, the conversation shifting to something more serious. "I know I've let you down, and I know it's going to take time to make things right, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being a better son, not just for you, but for me too. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes." I felt a tightness in my chest at his words. It wasn't the grand apology I'd always hoped for, but it was real, and that was enough for me. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like you're really starting to understand. You don't need to fix everything all at once, but I'm proud of the steps you're taking." He nodded, looking out at the view. "I know it's going to take time, but I'm willing to put in the work." The next day, Marcus left for home, but something had shifted between us. There was a new sense of understanding, a renewed commitment to our relationship. It was a long road ahead, but I was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could get back to the way things were better even. As the months passed, I found myself adjusting to this new dynamic with Marcus. I still wasn't sure what the future held, but I felt more hopeful than I had in years. We kept in touch more often. Our conversations, once strained and awkward, were now filled with more substance. He was making an effort to be involved in my life, not just as a son asking for favors, but as a person who genuinely cared about me. I continued to explore my own life, too. I spent more time volunteering at the literacy center, joined a few local hiking clubs, and even started taking up photography as a hobby. The solitude that once weighed heavily on me now felt like a blessing. I was learning to appreciate the quiet, the stillness. For so long I had been defined by my relationship with Marcus, by my role as his father, his provider, his constant. But now, I was starting to see myself as more than that. I was Robert, a man who had lived a full life, who had given everything to his son, but who was also learning to live for himself. One day I received a text from Marcus. "Hey Dad, the twins want to know if you can come visit soon. They miss you. I miss you too. Let's plan a trip." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. It meant that Marcus was beginning to prioritize me again, that he was starting to see me as more than just a means to an end. It meant he was starting to see me as a person, a father, a man worthy of respect. I smiled as I read the message, feeling a warmth in my chest. I hadn't heard from Marcus like this in so long. It was a sign that things were changing, that we were both growing, both learning, and maybe, just maybe, we were finally on the right path. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I woke up to another message from Marcus. This time the text wasn't just a casual check-in, it was different, more intentional. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. The twins have been asking about you a lot, and honestly I've been feeling guilty about not keeping you in the loop. I know it's not enough to just say I'm sorry, but I want to be better. I want to make this right between us. I don't know when, but I'd love for you to come visit again. We can do something fun just like we used to." You and I sat there for a while, staring at the message on my phone, not sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. I missed the twins, and despite everything, I still loved Marcus, but another part of me felt hesitant, unsure of whether I was ready to dive back into that dynamic. I'd spent so many years bending over backwards, giving everything I had for him, only to feel ignored and unappreciated. But something in his words felt different this time. There was sincerity there, a true attempt to make things right, and maybe that was all I needed. I tapped out a quick response. "Let's do it. I'll start looking at flights." The message felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't an immediate fix, but it was a step in the right direction. I spent the next few weeks preparing for my visit. This time it was going to be different. I wasn't just going as a father trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I was going as a man who had taken control of his life again, a man who had learned to set boundaries and stand firm in his own identity. When I arrived at Marcus's house in Lake Tahoe, I was struck by how much had changed. The house was still the same beautiful modern with a large front porch overlooking the lake, but it felt different, more lived in. There were signs of life everywhere, the twins' toys scattered across the yard, the bikes parked near the front door, the faint scent of dinner cooking in the kitchen. It was chaotic in the way a family home is, but it was also welcoming. Marcus greeted me at the door, his usual energy replaced by a more grounded, calm presence. He seemed different, more present, like he wasn't just going through the motions anymore. "Hey Dad," he said, offering a genuine smile. "I'm glad you're here." "I'm glad to be here," I replied, shaking his hand, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. This wasn't just a visit, it was a chance to rebuild, to start over in a sense. Inside, the twins rushed over to greet me, practically climbing up my legs, hugging me like they hadn't seen me in years. Their faces lit up when they saw me, and for a moment, everything felt right again. It felt like the old days, the days when things were simpler, when I was the hero in their eyes. We spent the next few hours playing outside with the kids, talking, laughing, and catching up. It was a relief to feel so welcomed, to feel like part of their lives again. But as the evening wore on, we sat down for dinner, just the three of us, Marcus, Jessica, and me. The conversation turned more serious as we all settled into our seats, the laughter from earlier giving way to something more reflective. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice softer now, like he had something important to say. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about the last few months, about everything I've put you through, and I just wanted to say, again, that I'm really sorry for the way I've treated you. You've always been there for me, no matter what, and I've taken that for granted. I've treated you like you were just a resource, and that's not who you are to me. You're my father, and I need to start acting like it." His words hit me harder than I expected. There it was again, the sincerity in his voice, the genuine remorse. It was a long time coming, but I could hear it now. He wasn't just apologizing out of obligation. He was apologizing because he understood the weight of what he had done, and for the first time I felt like he saw me. "I appreciate you saying that, Marcus," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "It's not easy to admit when you've been wrong, but it's a start, and that means something." We sat there for a while in comfortable silence, just eating and enjoying each other's company. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, real progress. And I felt something in my chest ease, something I hadn't realized had been so tightly wound. The walls between us were slowly crumbling, and I could see Marcus trying, genuinely trying to make things right. The next few days were spent doing things we used to do together: hiking, eating at the little restaurants by the lake, watching the kids play. It was all simple, but it felt meaningful. As the visit drew to a close, I found myself feeling more hopeful than I had in a long time. The distance between us wasn't gone, but it was starting to close. Slowly but surely, we were rebuilding what had been broken. Before I left, Marcus gave me another small gift this time, a photo album filled with pictures of the twins and old family photos. "I know it's not much," he said, "but I want you to have this. It's our way of showing you that you're a part of our lives. You're important to us." I felt a lump in my throat as I flipped through the album. These were moments I had missed, moments that I had once taken for granted. But seeing them all together, in one place, made me realize something. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the father who was always there to pick up the pieces. I was part of their world just as they were a part of mine. "I'll keep this with me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." The drive back to Phoenix was quiet, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy with regret or uncertainty. It was quiet because something had shifted, something good. The relationship between Marcus and me wasn't fixed, and it probably never would be perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. A path where we could both heal, where we could both grow, and where we could finally be the family we were meant to be. I spent the next few weeks back in Phoenix, unpacking the emotions of my visit to Lake Tahoe. It was strange how much it had shifted things between Marcus and me, yet it felt so simple at the same time. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of unspoken grievances hanging over me. The bitterness I had carried for so long, the resentment, the disappointment, the feeling of being taken for granted was starting to fade, replaced by something lighter. I didn't know if it would last, but I finally felt like Marcus was starting to see me as more than just a bank, a safety net, or someone to call when things went wrong. And as the days passed, I found myself reflecting on the kind of man I had become. For so long, my identity had been tied to Marcus, tied to the idea of being his provider, his protector, his rock. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. It wasn't just the sacrifice of time and money. It was the emotional toll. I had given so much of myself, thinking that one day, it would all come back to me. But what I had neglected was the simple truth that I couldn't live my life for someone else. I needed to live for me. I had spent so many years being invisible in Marcus's eyes, allowing myself to be a background character in his story, always there to fix things, always there to help him get ahead. But now, things were different. I was different. And as painful as it had been to face the truth, I had come to realize something important. I wasn't just a father, I was a person in my own right. I had my own story, my own dreams, and for the first time in decades, I was allowing myself to live it. It wasn't long before I received another call from Marcus. He called more often now, not just when he needed something or when life had thrown him a curve. It was just to check in, to see how I was doing, to hear about my life in Phoenix. And each time we spoke, I could feel the walls coming down, piece by piece. "Hey Dad," he said on one of our calls. "How's everything going? How's the new place?" "It's good," I replied, a smile creeping onto my face. "I'm settling in. It's quiet here, but I'm getting used to it. I've been hiking a lot and volunteering at a literacy center. I even joined a photography club. Believe it or not, a photography club." He laughed lightly. "Dad, that's awesome. I never thought you'd be the type to join a club," I chuckled. "Well, life's funny that way. You never know what you'll end up doing once you stop worrying about everyone else's expectations." There was a brief pause on the line before Marcus spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And I want you to know that I'm working on earning your respect, Dad. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying." I felt a lump in my throat. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just giving. I felt like Marcus was giving too. Not in grand gestures, but in the small, consistent efforts that had started to define our relationship. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," I said, my voice steady, but thick with emotion. "It's not about being perfect. It's about the effort, and you're making it." A few months passed, and life in Phoenix started to feel more like home. I had settled into a rhythm, balancing my new hobbies, my volunteer work, and the occasional phone call with Marcus. He had made a habit of calling me once a week, just to chat, to catch up on the twins, and to talk about the things that were going on in his life. I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring anymore. I wasn't sitting by the phone hoping for a sign that he cared. Now he was the one reaching out, and it wasn't just about the calls. He had started making an effort in other areas of his life too. I noticed small changes in the way he talked about Jessica, the way he spoke about his work, even the way he handled stress. He was becoming more mindful, more aware of the impact his actions had on the people around him. I couldn't help but feel proud he was growing up. He was finally becoming the man I had always hoped he would be. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I needed to visit them again. I needed to see for myself that the changes weren't just words. I needed to see that the work Marcus had been doing on himself was real. So, I made the decision to go back to Lake Tahoe for another visit. This time, I wasn't just going as a father trying to keep things together. I was going as someone who was finally seeing the bigger picture. The trip to Lake Tahoe was different. This time, when I walked through the door, I wasn't met with the same tension that had greeted me on my last visit. There was no distance between Marcus and me. There were no walls. It felt ... natural, comfortable, like it had always been. Marcus greeted me with a hug, his arms strong and steady. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's good to have you here." "It's good to be here," I replied, looking around at the familiar surroundings. The kids were running around, playing in the yard, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that I was a part of their lives. I was no longer the distant figure in the background. I was part of the family, and that felt good. The next few days were spent enjoying the simple things, hiking through the woods, playing with the kids, and sitting around the dinner table as a family. We talked, laughed, and shared memories. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than I could have hoped for. It was a real connection, not built on expectation or obligation, but on mutual respect and understanding. On the last evening of my visit, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Marcus joined me. He handed me a beer and sat down beside me. "You know, Dad," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about the way we used to be, and I can't tell you how much I regret the way I treated you. But I also know that things can't go back to the way they were. We're not the same people we were before, and that's okay. We've both changed, but I think we're in a good place now, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you." I looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes clear. "I'm proud of you, Marcus, for everything, for the work you're doing, for the father you're becoming. I can see the change, and I want you to know that I'm proud." We sat in silence for a while, just watching the sun dip below the horizon, the quiet of the evening settling over us. For the first time in years, I felt like everything was as it should be. The following weeks back in Phoenix felt different. The air seemed a little lighter, the days a little brighter. It wasn't just the warm weather or the sunshine, though. It was something more subtle, something inside me that had shifted. After my visit to Lake Tahoe, after that moment with Marcus on the porch, I realized that I had started to see him in a new light. The son I had raised, the one I had hoped would turn out to be someone strong and capable, was beginning to show me that he was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally relax. Things between Marcus and me weren't perfect. They never would be, but they were real. We had found a new rhythm. The constant worry I had carried about whether he would ever grow up, about whether he would ever see me as more than just a resource, was beginning to fade. It had taken years, but the relationship we had now felt like one I could live with. One where both of us gave something, where both of us made an effort to meet in the middle. As the months passed, we continued to talk regularly. Our calls were less about the past and more about the present, about life, about the kids, about work. It was a conversation that felt balanced. No longer was I the one always doing the talking, always trying to fix things. Marcus was showing up, really showing up, in ways that mattered. He would call just to check in, to ask about my day, to tell me about his. He started taking more time to talk about the twins and what was going on in their lives. It felt like he was finally seeing me as more than just a father. I was a person in his life, too. One day, I got a text from Marcus that caught me a little off guard. It read, "Hey Dad, I've been thinking the twins have been asking about you a lot lately. We want you to come visit us in the next few weeks. We're planning a family weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake, and we'd love it if you could come." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me hesitated, not sure if I was ready for another trip back, another emotional checkpoint. But then I realized something. This wasn't just about me visiting them. It was about being included, truly included, as part of their family. It was about Marcus seeing me as someone who wasn't just there for special occasions, but as someone he wanted around, someone he needed in his life. That thought alone made my decision easy. I texted back, "I'd love to come, let me know the dates and I'll book a flight." When I arrived at the cabin, the sense of familiarity hit me again. It wasn't like the old days when I had felt like an outsider in my own son's life. This time it felt different. There was a warmth in the air, a quiet kind of acceptance, as if all of us were finally on the same page. The twins greeted me with the same energy they always had, their little faces lighting up when they saw me. Marcus was waiting for me at the door, looking genuinely happy to see me. "Dad, I'm glad you could make it," he said, pulling me into a hug. "It means a lot to have you here," and for the first time in a long time, I felt like it truly meant something. I wasn't just there because it was expected. I was there because I mattered. The weekend was filled with the usual family activities, fishing, hiking, sitting by the fire, but it wasn't just the activities that made it special. It was the conversations, the moments of connection, the way we all came together without pretense. It felt easy. There was no tension in the air, no heavy silences, just real meaningful moments. On the last night, as we sat around the fire pit, Marcus turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad," he said, looking down at the flames, "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through, and I realized that a lot of what I've been missing in my life is, well, it's you. I've been so focused on everything else, on work, on trying to impress people, that I lost sight of what really matters. You've always been there for me, and I've taken that for granted. I know I can't change the past, but I just want you to know that I'm here now. I'm really here, and I'm grateful for you." I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. This wasn't the first time he'd apologized, but something about his words felt more genuine this time. There was a maturity to them, a recognition that we both had our roles to play in rebuilding this relationship. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm proud of the man you're becoming. I know we've had our challenges, but we're getting through them together." He nodded, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Thanks, Dad. I needed to hear that." As I left the cabin a few days later, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just the change in Marcus that I said was the change in myself. I had come to terms with the fact that I couldn't control everything, that I couldn't fix every problem, but I had learned to let go. I had learned to give Marcus the space he needed to grow and to show up in his own way. And in turn, he was showing up for me, not in grand gestures, but in the small ways that mattered. The trip had been a turning point for both of us. It wasn't a resolution of everything, but it was a step, a significant one. It marked the beginning of something different, a relationship built on mutual respect, communication, and effort. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real. And for the first time I felt like I could relax, knowing that we were on the right path. Weeks passed, and life in Phoenix continued. I continued my hobbies, my volunteer work, and my quiet life in the condo. I still got the occasional call from Marcus, and each time, I felt a little closer to him. The conversations were no longer about what he needed from me. They were about what we needed from each other: understanding, patience, and a willingness to put in the effort. One evening, after a particularly long day, I sat down on my balcony with a cold beer, watching the sunset over the mountains. I felt at peace. The past was no longer weighing on me. I had learned to let go of the things I couldn't control, and in doing so, I had made space for something better. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just a father. I was Robert, a man who had lived a full life, who had made his share of mistakes, but who was finally beginning to understand what it meant to live for himself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of fulfillment I hadn't known in years. Maybe Marcus and I would never get back to what we had before, but maybe that wasn't the point anymore. Maybe what mattered was the journey ahead, the one we were building together, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. As I sat there, looking out at the horizon, I realized something important. Life is about the moments we share, the connections we rebuild, and the second chances we give ourselves and others. Relationships are never perfect, but with effort, patience, and understanding, they can become stronger than ever. If you've ever found yourself at a crossroads, struggling with the weight of the past, remember that it's never too late to start anew. The road may be long, but each step forward is a victory. So, whether it's with family, friends, or yourself, take the time to heal, to listen, and to rebuild. Sometimes, the most unexpected journeys lead to the greatest transformations. Thank you for joining me on this journey of growth, healing, and reconnection. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that dive into the complexities of life, relationships, and the power of second chances. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to rebuild and grow. And if you want to keep up with the latest updates and stories, hit that notification bell. Thanks again for being a part of this. Keep growing, keep learning, and always remember it's never too late to start over.